Greetings, fellow tarot travelers, tripping through the tetrahedral triptych of cards I shall lay before you. I'm Tarot Torch. Whatever happened to Syria? Well, we know that the Golan Heights was recognized by Trump and that Syria didn't like it and went before the United Nations Security Council, saying the Security Council Resolution 497 of 1981 nullifies this recognition. But somehow it held water. And ISIS was defeated in Syria, but still, the Russians and the Syrian Air Force have bombed the Idlib hospitals before bombing and genociding Idlib. And this act was condemned by the international community for such war crimes against civilian populations. Meanwhile, Assad is trying to stack the deck with his law number 10, demanding that people show up in person to reclaim their property, and they can't because they left in rubber dinghies to go to Europe to, leave the bombing and chemical warfare behind. And so he's basically giving all the land to his cronies, so that only Assad's supporters will live in Syria. So, oh my God, the whole situation has started off horribly, and it continues to go bad and worse and worse and worse. So I'm very concerned and wondering, what is going on with Syria? Because of the recognition of the Golan Heights by America, Hezbollah moved in and has been making a lot of war-rattling, saber-rattling statements. And so Israel went forward and bombed Hezbollah targets even on military bases, which, is an act of war against Syria. So, and yet everything's kind of like in a stalemate. It's kind of like it's World War III, but everybody is having an intermission. It's on that level. And what's so interesting is the way that this whole war started. It began, believe it or not, when they uncovered some ancient ruins called Göbekli Tepe in Syria. Now, I'm not saying that discovering ancient ruins caused a war, but it sure is coincidental. Some of these ruins, they're buried for a reason. Anyways, today's deck is the Ancien Tarot de Marseille, and this one is a beautiful deck done in 1930 by Paul Marteau. And in 1930 was the year that Syria became a country and was under French rule at the time due to the ending of World War II. So this deck really has a lot to do with the history of Syria. And as you saw, I shuffled the deck, and I'd just like to know, what is going on with Syria? So the first card is, whoops, the deck's upside down. This so frequently happens with me. The first card is the Pope. There's been some things written, and I've heard on YouTube quite a bit about Catholic interests invested in the Middle East. There's an old connection between the Catholic Church and Israel and, Acre and many of the places in the Middle East, including Syria. The Pope has wanted to basically have the Catholic Church with the papacy, not in the Vatican, but in Jerusalem. So I'm not sure this is the physical Pope or maybe metaphorical. Let's see what the next card shows. And it is the Cavalier de Denier. And this is the Knight of Coins. Actually, it's the Horseman of Coins. Cavalier means horseman. Chevalier means knight. And he's in the place known as the present. And they're both looking towards the future, the Pope rather casually, but their glances are in the same direction, which you would think would unite them. But in fact, it means that they do not share common interests. They're not assisting each other. They're not interactive with each other. But they do have perhaps a common objective. And the next card is, the one that integrates, is Temperance. And here's Temperance in the future, and she's looking back at these two gentlemen. So at least there's some integration in the chart. So we see that in the ancient history of Syria, well, we all know that there's been religious conflict. We know about the Jews versus the Muslims and the Christians and how they've been treated. And we all know about all the different religious enclaves and how horribly they've been invaded and forced into prostitution and sold on slave markets. So we know religion has played a role. I mean, look at ISIS. It's a theocracy, basically. And then in the present tense, with the Cavalier du Dernier, right now it's all about money. You know, it costs too much to have troops in Syria. Trump pulls them out. The Syrians want to make money from their land. They're taking the land away from normal people and stealing the land for cronyism so they can capitalize off of it. I mean, it's just a horrific greed fest that's destroying that country currently. And then we see in the future that Temperance is coming. Now, Temperance is the only angel in the deck, and she is the angel of mercy and of compassion, and she rules over reincarnation, and she's one of the most wonderful cards in the entire tarot deck. So the future does not look quite as bleak as one might expect. And indeed, both the Pope, which is the religious segmentalism, and the greed factor, are both looking at temperance. I mean, even Russia is there for money. They want bases and ports in Syria because they need access to the Mediterranean to ship their oil to Europe, and if they send out a pipeline. And let's not forget the pipelines. I mean, Syrian war has been a pipeline war from the beginning. So we can all understand the moneyed interests. And so here we have, in the future, something good, the angel of mercy and compassion. Let's see what she's really about. And we'll do below and then above. Below is Le Pendu, the hanged man. And he is suspended animation and seeing things from a different view and coming up with an alternative reality, a vision. And the one above her is the horseman of cups, the Cavalier de Coupe. So what we see here is an angel of compassion that's composed of standing still, which is obviously what's going on currently, and the Cavalier de Coupe, which represents the coming forth of a religious, spiritual, or rhetorical, artistic individual whose speaking soothes the people. It could even be a musician whose music reaches the hearts of the people, but somehow that this individual deeply touches the hearts and souls and minds of the people. And so what we're seeing from the angel of compassion is that by holding still right now and doing nothing, some kind of reckoning spiritually is occurring in the region known as Syria. Maybe they killed too many children. Maybe they've destroyed too much land. Maybe they've tortured one too many persons, and now their hearts are beginning to waken up to the fact that this barbarism has served no purpose but to destroy their souls. Maybe there's some kind of an awakening going on, and we're all supposed to wait for some great religious spiritual leader. Now, if this card were reversed, and of course I don't look at reverse cards, but there is the Hanged Man, and he certainly is in a reversed type position. And if this card were reversed, it would be an Antichrist type figure. It'd be some kind of evil leader. And, that's possible too in that part of the world. So the point is, people are holding on to where they are, and they're not going any further in a stalemate. And even the economic interests are being halted. And Russia is being halted. And I imagine everybody's being busted in the UN. I'm sure that there's recon, satellite recon, and other things that can be brought out in these proceedings that would just shame the Russians and shame the Syrians for what they're doing in Idlib, beyond compare. And now that ISIS is disbanded, I'm sure there are many women coming forward with horrific tales that would shame American and Saudi Arabian interests. So, we have a situation here where, as bad as the religious divisionalism has been, and as bad as the greed, making money from bombs and earning profits at the expense of children's limbs, somehow, there's going to be an angel present. And once again, it could be a fallen angel. We do have the palm dew here. And, in that region, that's more likely than an angel of compassion because, the Middle East, if it's supposed to be so spiritual, why have they always killed and tortured and maimed each other? It seems to me that it's more like a throne for the devil than for God by the way humans treat each other. And so that is always a possibility in that part of the world. But we'll remove these cards for now. And I'd like to have a little clarification on the moneyed interests. So we have the Cavalier de Bâton, which is contract. See, this is a scroll, not just a baton, not just a wand he's holding. And so these can be agreements, treaties, they can be trade agreements, they could be NGO investments for the rebuilding of the region. And so that's interplaying with the money. And the Seven of Swords, which has to do with coming up with plans that will work to defeat an enemy without having to pull a single trigger. It has to do with having the knowledge and the ability to run tactical gamesmanship and to come up with different strategies. And so my guess is that the cards are really speaking right now about NGOs. My guess is that Syria can't rebuild without assistance, and the assistance won't come unless they stop torturing and murdering and killing, and maybe they put down the condition that Assad must step down, because if he wasn't inhumane before, certainly he is now by the bombing of Idlib's hospitals. That speaks volumes. I think whatever rhetoric was put out there about Assad being a monster, it always was, well, maybe he is, maybe he isn't. There was no photography from the Black Ops sites, but now that they've bombed the hospitals, we never knew who did the chemical warfare. We never really realized in the middle of the warfare who was the more wicked of the two sides. But the bombing of the hospitals before bombing of the civilians, that spelt the death sentence for Assad. That was his complete public damnation. He will never, ever outlive what he has done to his reputation. And so my guess is that the NGOs won't rebuild Syria and won't invest in Syria unless he steps down, unless reformation occurs, unless religious integration returns. Instead of a religious war, we have religious integration. And some very soft-spoken person. It could be Obama himself. For as much as Trump hates Obama, in this time of need, he could have sent Obama there and nobody even knows that he's gone. I'm just using that as an example. But some soft-spoken person like him going to that region and providing temperance and causing them to put down their guns and stop killing and destroying. And that's the trouble with killing and destroying. It carries so much momentum. It's hard to stop once you've started. It was hard to stop the American Civil War. It was hard to stop World War II. And, hate does not stop hate. Only love stops hate. This is an ancient and unchanging law. And the only way to end a war is through complete and total surrender to peace. Only through surrender to peace do we have an end to war. And the cards are showing us that the end to war is soon at hand and peace will be restored. And I certainly hope and pray for that.